Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Still fighting this bronchitis. My voice is still coming and going. Anyway, I am very late with my card for this week's Color Throwdown Challenge. I decided to pull out the CZ Design HollaWeen stamp set. And I have some black cardstock here. And I'm inking up the ghosts from the set with Hero Art Unicorn white ink. And I'm very gently tapping the stamps onto this ink pad because it is a pigment ink, and you don't want to press really hard and smush that ink into the stamp because then it's too much ink, it'll get really goopy and you'll lose any detail, etc, etc. So I just tap, 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 tap just to get the stamp inked up. And I'm pressing it onto this black cardstock, and I'm just covering this entire piece of cardstock with these little ghosts. And then by the time I get to the last one, the first ones have somewhat, they're not dry because pigment ink takes a while to dry. I'm taking my Perfect Pearl powder by Ranger here and picking it up with the applicator brush, and then I'm brushing it over all of these. Now, some of them are not dry enough. They do smear, but same thing. I'm not rubbing really hard with the brush. I'm more lightly, just very lightly dusting it on. And it sticks to the pigment ink. And I said in a previous video, and I've said in many videos, you do not need to seal this because Perfect Pearls have their own binder and their own resins in the powder. So when this ink does fully dry, this powder's still not going to, it's not going to just fall off. So I've brushed it onto all of these ghosts. Like I said, I'm not worried about the little bits here and there that smear. I brushed back as much as I could back into the container, and then I'm taking a Swiffer cloth and rubbing this over the cardstock, and it picks up most of the excess powder. Again, there's still going to be a bit on the black cardstock, but I don't mind because it's got all that shimmer and it's just so much fun. So I've completely covered all that, wiped it with my Swiffer cloth. I die cut it with the second largest of the Simon Says Stamp Basic rectangle dies. And then I have a piece of vellum here, and I used my anti-static powder tool first. And then I'm inking up the Holla stamp from that HollaWeen stamp set. I inked it up with Simon Says clear embossing ink, and the first time I stamped it, I didn't stamp it perfectly. I slipped a little bit. So when I coated it with the embossing powder, you could see it. You can't really see it at all on camera, but it was a mess. So I stamped it a second time. There's enough space on that vellum, and this time I made sure to stamp straight up and down. And that worked much better. And then I'm coating it with some purple Wendy Vecchi violet embossing powder, which is perfect. Like I said, this is for the color challenge. And the color challenge right now is purple, black, and white, kind of Halloween themed. So melted that with my heat tool, and I did both of them just so I don't end up with like loose embossing powder everywhere. So once I have all of that melted with my heat tool, I can funnel that embossing powder back into the container. And I have just a piece of purple cardstock from my stash that just happened to be very similar to the embossing powder. So I decided to use that to ink up the word happy and the rest of the sentiment ween. Ink it up with that same clear embossing ink, but this time I'm using some Avery Elle Detail White embossing powder. So stamp those, sprinkle them with the embossing powder. I'm going to melt those with my heat tool. And then in the coordinating HollaWeen die set, there are all these dies that'll cut out most of the words, which I think is kind of cool. So I decided to use the Holla, of course, for the Holla sentiment, and then there's a outline die for the word, or the part of the word ween. So I'm going to line that up, and I'm going to tape it into place with a little bit of washi tape so that this doesn't move when I run it through my die cut machine. And I really love the Holla die because it doesn't just die cut like around the edges, like it die cuts the entire word, like in all the centers of all the letters and stuff too. So again, line that up on the good one and then ran that through my die cut machine. And then for that little piece that says happy, I grabbed my Tim Holtz Tonic trimmer that I just got. And I used that to trim this down, and it took a little bit of fiddling, but the edges of this, and I've said this before, the edges of this are not insanely sharp, so I didn't have any problem with my fingers being near it. But I'm able to adjust this tiny little piece, and I can hold it with the plastic piece that's meant to hold the cardstock and trim down the tiniest little pieces off of this. That's what the best thing is with these trimmers, is you can get clean cuts, and I can do tiny slivers of cardstock. So I trimmed that down until it was just trimmed the way I wanted around the sentiment. And then before I decided how I wanted to adhere this, I ended up cutting 2 more pieces of vellum with that same die, just so that I could back this embossed one with those pieces. It gave it a little bit more weight, because I wanted to pop this up with some foam tape, and vellum is obviously fairly kind of flimsy. And plus I also wanted it to be a little bit thicker so that it stood out a little bit more against that black cardstock with all the shimmery ghosts. So I just used really thin lines of multimedia matte adhesive, adhered all of those together, and then I'm going to use some Darice little foam strips here, and I'm actually going to cut them in half. This probably wasn't necessary because I have the 3 layers of vellum. It's almost impossible to see through them at this point, but I cut them in half just because that's where my brain was. So I cut them in half and ran all this adhesive along the back of this piece. Again, if I was to redo this though, I would just chop up small pieces, but not in half, and just quickly stick them on the back and not spend all this time adding these really, really thin pieces. But it worked, and because they're so thin, they were easy to manipulate, so I was able to go around and basically coat the entire back of this. So I gave it one last wipe with that Swiffer cloth, just to pick up any excess Shimmer Perfect Pearl powder there. And then I'm going to adhere the script sentiment first, and then I'm going to adhere the other 2 as well with that Darice foam strip, so that they're all in place here. And then I can set that aside, and I'm going to work on my card base, which is some heavyweight white cardstock, cut to 4 1/4 by 11 and scored at 5 1/2, so it's a top folding A2 size card. And I'd stamp the spooky on that same scrap of purple cardstock, and heat emboss it with that white embossing powder, and then die cut it with a coordinating die. And then I just have it lined up on the inside of my card so I can see where to stamp the Salutations stamp. So I stamped that with the clear embossing ink and coated it with that purple embossing powder. And I'm going to quickly melt that with my heat tool. And again, before I adhere the spooky, I decided to stamp just one of the ghosts on the inside as well with that white pigment ink, which isn't going to really show up, but I'm going to stamp it with the white pigment ink, and then I'm going to coat that again with the Ranger Perfect Pearl powder. So it's not obvious, but once the light catches it, you can see it, and it just kind of gives it that little extra something. And I thought that would look really cute with the sentiment. So I stamped it, let it sit for just a tiny bit, and then gently just tapped on that Perfect Pearl powder, and then tilted the cardstock and was able to brush the excess just right back in the container. So now I've got this fun little shimmery ghost on the inside of my card as well. So once I've got that, I can adhere that sentiment, and I just use my multi-medium matte adhesive to adhere the sentiment over the embossed sentiment here on the inside of the card. So I've got my shimmery little ghost, my purple embossed sentiment, and then this purple cardstock die cut with the white embossed sentiment. So got that into place, and then I'm going to adhere the card front to the card base. Again, I thought about popping this up with foam tape, but decided to just adhere it flat to the card base because I have all the sentiments popped up with foam tape already. So I just used my ATG adhesive and pressed that into place, and then I grabbed my gloss white Nouveau drops, and I'm just going to add a few of those to my card, and that finishes off my card. So I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I will have a link to the supplies used. I'll have a link to the color challenge, which as of posting this video, you can still play along. However, if it's over, we have a new color challenge posted every single week. So you can check that out and play along if you want. It's open to everyone. And I'm still giving away the HollaWeen cards that I have been making during this series. So I'll have a little giveaway on my at the end of my blog post as well. So just go on over there if you are interested. And just to finish off this card, I pulled out one of my purple envelopes from Simon Says Stamp, stamped a few of the ghosts with that white pigment ink, brushed on that Perfect Pearl powder so that the matching envelope has that fun shimmer to it as well, which just completes the card. You know, if I'm able to do a matching envelope, I think that just really pulls it all together. So brushed off the excess, used that little Swiffer cloth and wiped all that off. And then I'll just use a baby wipe to clean my work surface because I got Perfect Pearl powder everywhere. So that was my card for today. Thank you guys so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting on my videos. Every little bit of support helps, and I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.